Welcome to another episode of This Week in Indies, where we gather together to have creative conversations. While face-to-face conversations come easy for most, how do we as creatives create that same kind of flow in our work? Can a reader truly be thrown from the story with terrible dialogue? How does one keep this from happening? Does body language, facial expressions, and physical reactions help or derail things? We'll discuss these possibilities and more as we join this week's panel at the round table. Then, we celebrate a special Indie Connection, episode 200 with C.L. Cannon, as she brings us independently published books similar to A Darker Shade of Magic by B.E. Swamp. Finally, get ready for the 5-minute drill, where our panelists race against the clock to answer some interesting questions. So sit back and grab a cup of coffee and get ready for a good time. Here's your host for this week's episode, Madeline Dale. Hello, everyone, and welcome to December with This Week in Indies. We have a great crew today to chat about a wonderful topic. I know writing dialogue can be kind of a challenge for a lot of us, including myself. I'm still getting better at it. As an author, writer, we are always constantly learning. So this is actually kind of a conversation I'm looking forward to. But before I bring everybody in, I do want to mention that if you're watching from Facebook, send us a star. Let our hosts and producers know how much you appreciate what we do here at Go Indie Now. Every time you contribute, you get entered into our season package drawing with gift cards, swags, and more. But without further ado, I'm Madeline Dale, the chapter goddess, and I'm a fictional author with multiple fantasy, romance, paranormal stuff out there. And here is our great panel of authors this morning. Morning. We're going to go around and I'm going to let you guys introduce yourself, tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about who you are and what you write. And we're going to start right here.
Good heavens. Hi, good morning. My name is Wayne Trammell. I write historical fiction and urban fantasy, most recently the Johnny Lycan Werewolf PI series, and I live and write here in Las Vegas. I'm not actually in front of the sign at the moment, but I live about 2 miles down the road, so there.
Nice.
Good morning. I'm Mickey Dubrow. I have 2 books out. One is a dystopian thriller called American Judas, and the other came out this year. It's a young adult time travel novel called Always Agnes. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I worked in TV for many years before I became a full-time writer.
Ooh, nice.
Good morning. I'm Ariel Dawn. I write a little bit of everything, mostly in the realm of romance, paranormal romance, reverse harem, urban fantasy, and I even dabble a little bit in contemporary romance. A little bit about me, I'm from Pittsburgh, PA, and I've been writing since 2020. I started with a short story, and it just kind of lit up from there. And today I've published, I think, somewhere around 50-ish titles. I think I published like 25 this year. So write like a machine.
Nice.
Hi, I'm David Green. I am in Galway in Ireland, as well as being the host of the Green Room on the Go Indie Now network, which I always forget to mention. So there you go, Joe. I have mentioned it. I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, and cozy fantasy, and I have 2 books out tomorrow that are both in my urban fantasy series.
Nice.
Hi everyone, I'm Karina. I am an author of 14 fiction books. I write everything from young adult right through to dark romance and erotica. I'm also the host of Creative Inc. TV show and the podcast and YouTube show Behind the Pen.
Sweet. I am excited to have you all here today. And you guys are like pumping out those books. It's awesome. So, and David, speaking of the Green Room, that does drop this week. I have a note to mention that, and I'll bring it up again later. All right, guys, let's talk about like the biggest struggle you have with writing dialogue. What is the biggest challenge for you personally? And you guys just jump on it.
Well,
Um,
I like writing dialogue. It's the most fun thing for me. The problem is getting the voice right. I have been told on more than one occasion that, a character like Johnny is a 30-year-old kid from Chicago. He is not a 62-year-old bitter, cynical old man. Uh, and there is a tendency for my voice to slide into their voices.
It's something similar for me. I love writing dialogue. That's where the action, the juices come in, where you can really get into the story through dialogue. My problem, again, it's not the voice as such; it's the language, where the character's from, what sort of age, the lingo they would use, slang. To get that right, to get that character over to the reader, that's quite. It takes a lot of research, that part.
I think for me, I really enjoy writing dialogue more than most because to me, in a sense, I've always got the characters talking in my brain. And to me, in a sense, they're like real people, but they're real. So I feel like I'm constantly having that conversation. For me, the issue is the pacing because there's a lot of times I feel like with action, I'm not so good with the action, and sprinkling that in there to kind of mix it up a little bit so you don't have, a paragraph of straight dialogue or a paragraph of straight action. I think it's the mixing of it that I have a little bit more trouble with.
I'm like Ariel. I love writing dialogue, and I get carried away. And I could write a whole book that was just dialogue. I like how it conveys information and reveals character. I also love what characters don't say, how they don't answer questions when you're trying to find out what's going on, and it deepens the mystery of the story.
The most difficult I've ever had is creating my own language for a series of books, which is like one of those things that you kind of have to do. Everyone thinks that they have to do when you write an epic fantasy is to kind of like have some kind of made up language in there, and it's always a massive big mistake. Don't do it because it's a nightmare.
Yes, yes. And I totally forgot to mention everybody hanging out with us in the comments. We've got Anita, Vanessa. She says she can't stay long. She's got someone coming over. And also stupid YouTuber erasing all the text when I use smiley, making me type it over again. AJ Wilkin, hey everyone. Looks so weird from this side of the screen. Karina breaking the fourth wall and Wayne breaking the fourth wall. So I want to jump back over to Mickey's comment because he mentioned the stuff that was not said. You're talking about like body language and stuff, right?
No, it's more like when the character, I mean, that could be part of it. Take that back. It's more like, characters, they're holding secrets. And, stories are so much about revealing secrets eventually and keeping the reader hooked to find out what happened. And so often that character is going to do everything they can not to tell you the truth or not to tell you the information the main character needs. So I like to keep, but so much is revealed by what they don't say, the lies. Those are clues as well. And I just enjoy that.
Ooh, I like that. So I want to bring us down into kind of like the extra stuff that goes with it, not just the language like they're speaking. How do you utilize body language or internal thoughts and stuff to make that dialogue move better as the story progresses?
You have to make sure that you've got the right amount of description in between the dialogue. So you've got the setting without taking the action away, making sure that the he said, she said isn't used too often.
Yeah.
Making sure that you have the right tags, But yeah, I think it's finding the right amount of dialogue and description to keep it flowing.
I actually just discovered discovered there was a word for what I was trying to do. If you've read Save the Cat, there is a whole thing called Pope in the Pool, which is where there's a dialogue scene and you have to have some kind of action, something going on besides just two people talking in order to keep people engaged. And there's a whole description of why it's called Pope in the Pool. Don't make yourself crazy. But the whole idea of people don't just talk. You know, they drum their fingers, they're driving and having the conversation in the car. There's something going on that adds then to what Mickey was saying about, you know, when they look away rather than answer directly, or, you know, there's an uncomfortable pause. It gives you that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think to kind of jump on that, for me, I'm a very sensory person in general. So even just when I'm out with my friends, when I'm out with my husband, when we're talking in a space, I notice everything. I hear, you know, the people behind me having their conversation. I can see the little kid over here who's jumping out of the aisle, you know, who's causing the havoc. So for me, when I'm writing that dialogue and I'm writing in those spaces, I try to incorporate as much of the sensory, I think, as I can, as if I was in that space, because that's how I process my space. So.
It also, I think, helps. It's funny because so many of my books, as a matter of fact, all of them are written in first person. You can kind of explicitly have the external and the internal monologue. So I'm a big fan of, you know, put it in quotes, and then there's in italics what the character is actually thinking, which creates some tension.
Yeah.
I think with body language and stuff as well, it's that whole show don't tell thing as well. So you know you can use body language to you can use body language to kind of show how a character is kind of feeling when maybe their dialogue doesn't reflect the way that they're actually feeling as well. And other things like that, just to kind of just makes the scene more dynamic, because you know dialogue is good and fun and it's necessary and all that kind of stuff, but you know it's like anything else in a story and the way that you kind of write, and you don't want to do too much of it. You need to kind of have that balance, and a nice bit of description, a little bit of body language, and a little bit of everything else just makes it more dynamic than just two people just talking at each other.
I wrote a scene recently where one of the characters owned a cat, and the cat came in the room, and how everyone reacted to the cat helped move the dialogue and also show how the people felt. And when I was done, I was like, God, can I come up with an excuse to have a cat in every scene so I can use that device again?
Yeah. Wow. That's actually really curious that you do that, because that is something that happens, is when animals come into the room, different things happen. That's so
If
great.
you've ever been on a Zoom call, you've experienced that with the cat.
Yes. Wow. So
maybe I'll branch out to dogs at some point and birds. Who knows?
Yeah. So do you guys have a favorite, like a go-to kind of dialogue formula, so to speak? Like, have you found that you kind of, when you're writing dialogue, they kind of fall into a similar pattern of what you've used before?
I would say for me, more or less, it kind of really depends on if I'm writing third or if I'm writing first person, because I do write both. So I notice that a lot with when I'm writing first person, kind of like some others said, interspersing some of that dialogue with the sensory things and the body language. I more or less tend to focus on the internal thought in addition to the spoken thought than I do like when I'm in third. So there's definitely, I think, a pattern for when I'm writing each, you know, depending on the perspective.
Dialogue comes first for me. I get that dialogue out, get that conversation out, then I'll go back and I'll put in the action or the move, what needs to be done to make it all flow and fill it out.
I think for me, but whatever happened is with dialogue is just to make sure that the characters' voices are consistent throughout. I think good dialogue, you should be able to know who is talking to who and who is saying what if you take all the tags and description away. If it all just sounds like the same people talking, then it's not good dialogue, So because everyone has their own particular way of talking, everyone has their own particular way of communicating, and that should be reflected with the characters that you create as well. So like just making sure that like that voice is consistent throughout is like probably the most important thing that I kind of work on. Not even taking into account like what is the purpose of the dialogue or what is happening in the scene. It's just making sure that like that particular cadence and that particular manner is just what it was on page 1 that it is on page 400 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean it's not a cheap trick, but it is a technique where before I start, especially if they're a major character, I always try to figure out, what's their do they curse? Do they stammer? Is there something unique about that voice? And then try to make sure, at least at the beginning of each conversation, that I highlight that so the audience has that in their head, and then they can read the rest of the dialogue kind of in that character's voice.
Yeah, I've usually done a character layout for each character, so I kind of have an idea of what kind of person they are. And so when they're speaking, I try to get into their head. How educated were they? Do they have a chip on their shoulder? Just things like that.
That's smart. I like never would have thought to consider some of those things, like in my character Mickey, the chip on the shoulder stuff, and like how you guys kind of the lists were like how just the way they talk. Well, mine kind of like when they come together, they just come out on the page. So.
Well, some of this is my early, I have a performance background, and so I often think of it in terms of a script.
Yeah.
Before I flesh it out and turn it into actual prose, and so the dialogue part, I kind of act out, if you will, sometimes out loud, sometimes not, depending on who's home and can witness it. But kind of adopting the character and saying it out loud helps that some, although that sounds terribly pretentious and arty, doesn't it?
No, I'm going to have to jump in there, Wayne, because I mean that's the best thing. The best way to do good dialogue is to read it out loud and see what it sounds like, and see if it sounds like this is what a human being sounds like, or if am I just giving an info dump.
Yeah.
I tend to envision a lot of those scenes more or less almost like I'm watching the movie in my head. So I'm thinking about it more or less like when people are in the space, how are they talking to each other? And like I think Wayne said, or it might have been Mickey, about kind of getting in the headspace too, and kind of absorbing that character as yourself. Like how would they think? How would they speak? How would they react, to somebody saying this if they didn't agree with them outwardly as opposed to just inwardly as well.
Yeah. And we've got a couple extra comments on here that I didn't bring up. I've totally just been engrossed in the conversation. Sherry Alaki, hey y'all. AJ Mulligan, finding the balance in regards to our earlier discussion, a little bit earlier question. Sometimes the body language becomes a dialogue. Jessica Nettles is joining us. Morning, at least in some places. I hear the characters in my head, which is weird but true. Then I read the dialogue back to make sure what I hear makes sense. Wayne breaking the fourth wall. I'm an auditory learner, so I hear everything in my head before I type it. And Jessica says same. AJ Milliken, I think having an internal monologue helps with writing dialogue. Oh yeah, definitely. How do you
I
guys
definitely agree with
utilize,
that.
yeah, the internal dialogue? How do
Mhm.
you utilize that with your writing? And do you?
I think I do. Mostly because I tend to have a lot where my characters outwardly are one way, or they're portraying something one way, but we also get that look into their thoughts and their internal dialogue. I was kind of freaked out when I found out a lot of people don't have internal dialogue because I thought everybody did.
What?
Yeah, not everybody has an internal dialogue.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised because people kept talking about internal monologue, and monologue is only one voice. And how do you only have one voice in there?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
real. One voice does
Yeah.
not just happen.
I think with internal monologues for characters and stuff like that. I mean, again, it depends on the style of writing that you're doing and what POV that you're using.
Mhm.
And I have read some stuff that I written first person POV where the narrating style of the character is very different from their dialogue style, which is quite unusual because it should really be the same basically. And a lot of those instances, I think, and my urban fantasy series is written first person POV, that character shouldn't quite have as much dialogue as the other supporting characters because you know exactly what that character is thinking and doing and going to say because you are living in that person's narration. So you want to bring out other characters that are in the cast through dialogue. And give them more of a moment to shine. But if you are doing like a first person POV, like it's very, very crucial to make sure that like their dialogue matches the narration style as well. Unless they're doing it for a reason. If they're doing a little bit or something where they're just doing, talking in a certain specific way. But I've read a couple where it's quite an abrupt change between like, yeah.
Yeah.
That reminds me of Jim Thompson's The Killer Inside Me, where the goofy, sort of aw shucks sheriff was the cold-blooded killer and highly educated, and back and forth how he just kept fooling people with his behavior, but then you saw his internal dialogue that he was this stone cold killer.
Yeah. So if there's a reason, that's what I mean. If there's a reason, that's great. But if it's just overlooked, then it can be a bit of a problem. But if there's a reason for it, then it's very effective as well.
Yeah. Wow. And Jessica Nettles says, I was shocked when I learned that some people had no chatter in their heads. And Vanessa says, my head doesn't have chatter, but it has like conceptualizations. It's more like a ticker tape than voices. Yeah. Mine don't like to it's like not exactly like the crazy voices in your head, but it's the character voices just constantly percolating.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's more of like a person, like higher creative minds that have this kind of stuff going on. I don't know. Like, it's crazy.
Intelligence, Maddie. People with higher intelligence.
Yeah.
We can write it down to that.
I'll go with that.
So, with all these monologues and these dialogues that we're putting down on the paper, what are some things that you have noticed, kind of like from the reader's perspective, that tends to throw you out of the story as you're reading that dialogue?
Oh,
I think repetitive tags for me, it's so off-putting. You as a writer, you want to change it. You're like, oh, you shouldn't have used that. You should have used this. It takes me out of the story when I'm reading the book that has these tags that shouldn't be used.
There are two things for me. One is, unless you are using it very specifically, contractions are your friends. People generally don't speak in perfect grammatical sentences unless they're being very intentional about it. But the other thing that makes me crazy is when writers try to copy dialect and you wind up trying to read it and it's just gibberish. If you've tried to read any of Robert Louis Stevenson's stuff that's set in Scotland, it takes you 5 times longer to read than it should because he's writing in a Scottish brogue and it looks nothing like English unless you actually pronounce it. Those are the two things that make me crazy.
I would agree with Wayne on that. Like, I think there's ways of like doing accents through natural kind of dialogue and kind of slang and other stuff like that. But I remember trying to read Irving Welsh's stuff like Train Spotting and stuff like that when I was younger, and it's again written in a dialect, and I just found it just very hard going and not quite enjoyable. But some people probably like it. But yeah, for me, like contractions are really helpful because like a lot of people do. But again, it's like a consistent voice. If you do have someone who speaks very, very properly and doesn't make sure that stays the way for the entire time that they speak, they can't just kind of keep swapping in between not using them and using them. But I think this stilted dialogue in general is just kind of is just very pulls you out of the story when it feels like the characters are just are just saying things just for plot reasons and just for taking up page space, and it's just very, very kind of plodding. It can just become your eyes skim over it, and it might be important details that they're actually trying to say, but it's kind of just because it's the way that they're doing it in a way that's just not visually appealing or imaginative. You just skim it as a reader, and that is not it's not helpful because it's probably going to make the whole book suffer as a result.
I've read books that use vernacular very well. Like I finally got around to reading John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath, all 600 pages of it. And it's all vernacular, and it's beautiful and it's clear, but I never do it because, quite honestly, I just suck at it. So I just avoid it because I know I'm not going to do a good job. And also I don't want to be disrespectful. I feel like I'm, kind of it looks like I'm making fun of someone if I do it wrong.
I think as a reader, what throws me, and this is kind of touching on some points some others said too, the point of the dialogue too is to move the plot, right? It's to keep things moving, to keep things, at a steady pace. So when I read certain types of dialogue where it's more or less just very solid or canned, and there's no like emotion behind it, it's just the speaking to just, in a sense, kind of keep things going and not necessarily to add any emotional context to it, it takes me out of it a little bit. But that's a personal preference, I think.
I wonder, Ariel, I wonder if some of that is where the dialogue starts.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times, we envision the scene in our head and it starts with, "Hi, how are you?"
Mm-hmm.
"I'm fine." Like there's a lot
Yeah.
of stuff that goes on in a conversation that doesn't add to the story. And so where you come into the conversation can play a big part in that too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I don't like purple prose.
Same.
It feels like they're just trying to show off, look how I can convey this feeling. And it's like, is this the story, or are you just, I've read somewhere they just kept going and going to where I was like, wait a minute, was there a story here? I forgot. So that's the one I don't like. I like to keep it simple.
Yes. And we've got some good comments about some of the stuff with Jessica. This is back on the earlier topic. I have a full-fledged green room in my head. I think it takes me out when characters use more formal language than they should, like Wayne said, lack of contractions, etc. One thing that tosses me out is when more than one character uses the same type of phrases without having a similar background to where that would be the case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's usually the author's voice rather than the character's. Yeah. You have to read that stuff out loud to make it work. And if you've never heard the dialect, it can be a mess.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with this, Vanessa. I think word choice and rhythm is more important when conveying a dialect than something like phonetically spelling things. Ooh, I've never considered that. It boils down to this: will the reader understand what is being said? If the answer is no, then don't do it. And then Vanessa says, exactly, Jessica, exactly. Which is a good point. Like in our heads, some of us, we probably use more, I don't know, higher educated words than some, more photosynthesis words.
I'm guilty of that. I am so guilty of that.
And as you read through, you kind of have to be like, okay, is the audience that I am reaching,
Mhm.
will they understand what this word is,
Yeah, dial it back. Yeah.
Yeah. Does that kind of frustrate you guys when you come across situations like that?
As a reader, not really, but as a writer, I think you should just use words that you're comfortable with a lot of the time, especially if you're like, if in dialogue it's slightly different because obviously characters are different and there might be certain, people have certain ways of speaking, there's different kind of backgrounds, different intellect levels and what have you like that. But especially when you're kind of writing, it can stand out quite a bit in the narrations, particularly in third person POV. And Mickey said it before about purple prose. It can be very, very obvious sometimes where something's just kind of being thrown in there. Where, so to quote Kevin from The Office, few words do. Why use more words when few words do? And also that's the same with big kind of complicated, overly flowery words. There's sometimes there's not really the need for it, and sometimes again pulling it out of the story if you do come across something that's been used in the incorrect way, which isn't great.
I always get the feeling I can tell when somebody's typing with one hand and flipping through their thesaurus with the other.
I thought you were going to say something else there.
See, I said stated in the last sentence, so uttered, blurted. Something they're just going down the list.
That is too funny. I never would have thought of that. Yeah. And David having to take us to the gutter a little bit this morning already.
Look, when someone starts saying that I have the idea of someone typing with one hand and then doing, there's only one way I thought he was going to go with that.
I am so glad David is here. He takes the heat off me.
And I mean, you guys aren't even the ones that write the romance. I mean, David does write a little bit, but it's not over the top. Not like what probably like us women write.
You do know you're the worst, right?
I mean,
it's like the smuttiest things I've ever read were written by women. Bless them.
I mean, I haven't read Ariel's stuff, but like if she writes like AJ, I have a feeling like hers is up there with me.
I would say probably.
Oh man. So I totally forgot what we were talking about because we got thrown into the gutter. Oh my gosh. Stuff that throws you out and bothers you, so to speak. Like and
but that's actually an interesting point. Is as a writer, it's really easy to throw stuff in because it's cool or you think it's funny or whatever, and it actually detracts. I mean, you get into the whole argument of do people really need to swear? And the answer is sometimes, yeah. And it should be used strategically because if you do it all the time, it's just white noise.
Yeah.
Well, Vanessa's point there is a really interesting one because I think it kind of ties in with what Wayne was saying about his one-handed comment. Is that I think people that are more like articulate and developed vocabulary are able to kind of construct sentences well and use those words well and use them appropriately, and also then match the rest of the dialogue to it. Whereas I think what I'm sorry if this isn't what you're meant, Wayne, but like some people, when it feels like it's been thrown in, it's like it's like an old boot in the middle of like a flower garden or something. It just stands out completely and it's not supposed to be there. I think there's a way of making it all kind of flow together in a very natural kind of way.
Yeah. And like here's another good one. It depends on the book for me. My historical romance stuff will be very different than my paranormal stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh man, this is some great information, like things that stand out. And I'm with you guys about like not really dumbing it down, so to speak, just letting it flow. That's because, and Jessica adds that she doesn't have that thesaurus out either, so like no extra.
And what kills me is I know nobody's doing that. What they're doing is they're scrolling on their phone. Nobody is actually holding a thesaurus anymore.
I actually have one.
I got a paperback copy of a Roget's thesaurus when I was 11 that I still use.
There you go. There you go, Mickey. Yeah, I have a little pocket one. It comes out now and again. Not for that reason, mind you, but it does come out now and again.
I have
I've got-
several of them. I have the trope thesaurus, I have the conflict thesaurus, the emotional thesaurus. So, you know, I do
have
try
all of
to,
those
yeah.
too. They're so awesome. I love those. And I also have bookmarks saved on my like bookmarks bar to like the online thesaurus and the Webster's Dictionary and Urban Dictionary, like that kind of stuff too. So and Jessica says there's a difference between using that vocabulary you grew over decades and using words because they are fancier than others. I've read so many essays where students are just showing off. Yeah, they like this. The whole thing growing up, this may be just the millennial thing. I don't know. Was they try to make themselves sound more photosynthesis is the joke, like making them just using big words for the heck of it.
It's got to sound natural. It's got to flow, you know, and by doing that, you've got to listen to your dialogue. You've got to read it out. You've got to picture that person saying those words naturally. Would that person really talk like that? No, they wouldn't.
Probably not. Yeah, definitely not. Oh, man. So we're going to put a pause on this because we are going to check out this special Indie Connection, guys. This is episode 200 for CL Cannon's Indie Connection, and there are some great books to add to your TBR. I checked them out beforehand, and there are links to these in the description below, but check it out.
Hey guys, CL Cannon here from Fiction Atlas Press, and today I'm going to tell you about some indie books that you might enjoy if you're a fan of V.E. Schwab's A Darker Shade of Magic. And today is a very special episode because this is our 200th episode of the Indie Connection. So I want to do a book that I thoroughly enjoyed, and here are some indie books that I think you might like as well. The first book I have for you is called A Thief in Farshore by Justin Fike. A new world, a fight to the death. Her adventure has only just begun. I'm Charity, and before I saved the world, I was just a common thief. Also a drunk, rabble-rouser, harlot, and blasphemer, according to the magistrate, who sentenced me to 10 years of forced labor in Farshore, the Emperor's new colony across the Great Sea. You'd think that stepping off a prison ship on the ass end of the world was bad enough, but everyone in Byzantia has heard the stories. The pioneers who first settled this strange new world discovered horrible monsters, wild magic, and mythical creatures in the hills and forests beyond the city walls. Turns out all those nasties we didn't believe in were waiting on the far side of the world to eat us for lunch. A smarter girl than me would have kept her head down until she figured out which end was up. But how do I spend my first day in Farshore? Assaulted the governor, offended the gods, and got myself sentenced to fight in the bloody games of the arena before sundown. I survived Byzantia's tangled streets by thinking fast, running faster, and never letting anyone get too close. But I soon realized I was going to have to do the one thing I swore I'd never do again if I wanted to survive long enough to make it home. Trust someone. The second book I have for you is called Thief by Sarah Jane Leo. Happily Ever After doesn't come without a price. Anyone desperate enough to dwell within the crumbling city of Aloria knows that nothing in life is certain save for two indisputable facts. Everyone has a dream, and everything has a price. Driven from her home while she was still just a child, Sevi managed to survive Aloria's cruel streets using only her sticky fingers and indomitable spirit. She's never had any qualms about taking what she wants, so when the love of her life is suddenly stolen away from her, she will stop at nothing to get him back. Murder, black magic, and demonic pacts are of little consequence if it means Sevi finally has the chance to obtain her heart's desire. But is she willing to sacrifice her only friend to get the job done? In her obsessive quest for happiness, is there a line that even this selfish, self-proclaimed bitch won't cross? The third book I have for you is called The Thief Who Spat in Luck's Good Eye by Michael McClung. Amara is a thief with morals. She won't steal from anyone poorer than she is. Fortunately, anybody that poor generally doesn't have much worth stealing. Hallgren is a mage with a distaste for magic and a soul bartered away to dark powers. Together they embark on a quest for the fabled city of Tagath, where the secret of immortality is rumored to be hidden. But Amara and Hallgren aren't the only ones after the secret. Many others seek to utilize the hidden magic for their own twisted ends. And waiting in the ruined city with dark plans for the world are the twin gods, Ta-Agoth and Athagos. a brother and sister whose illicit passion is as destructive and vengeful as they are. Now, as potent sorceries clash in a violent struggle for domination over all that lives, Amara and Hallgren face a choice between the unthinkable and the unbearable, with the fate of the world hanging in the balance. And the last book I have for you is called A Tangle of Sleuth and Thief by J.S. Lockard. An impoverished rogue, a middling magician. When their lives become entwined, will they survive the maneuverings of a dark cabal? Erin wants out. Disguising herself as a boy to stay safe, the savvy 16-year-old thief just needs a little more coin to finally move her brother away from the cutthroat city slums. But when she's strong-armed into stealing a holy scepter, the feisty young footpad fears she's in over her head. Markham enjoys the good life, so the pampered son of a powerful magic user is horrified when his father ends his idyllic existence and sends him to study under his uncle in the bare-bones military clergy. And when a brazen burglar snatches his uncle's symbol of office, the naive recruit draws the inevitable duty of recovering the sacred artifact. Frustrated when her sibling refuses to leave town, Erin accepts an even deadlier job that threatens her dreams of freedom. And as Markham employs his rare gift for detecting lies to bring the bandits to justice, he worries the crimes could derail vital peace talks. Unwittingly caught up in a conspiracy, can these two unlikely heroes topple a sinister scheme?
Okay, that's all for me this week. I'll see you next week on the Indie Connection. Bye!
Oh man, guys, this chat is blowing up over here. And I'm just going to summarize it that the copy and paste and AI stuff came up. Holy cow, I hadn't even considered the effect AI has on dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thoughts, guys. Thoughts on that?
Well, it's not natural, is it? It's not us. It's not. There's no emotion. It's obvious when AI has created dialogue or even been used to write a book. It's repetitive. It's not flowing. It's not. There's no human. I'm going to use a totally different word here. Humanization in the writing. There's no emotion. It's so obvious. Yeah.
Well, part of the problem, of course, is that artificial intelligence doesn't account for natural stupidity.
Yes. Oh.
Well, until AI does things like Karina stumbled over a word, right? That's the kind of thing that people do. They never do that in artificial intelligence dialogue.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I do a bit of ghostwriting as well, and a lot of it is from a lot of it's from pitches or from outlines or whatever. But I recently was a few times I've been sent something like, can you expand something that I've already written, and most of the time it's AI written, and you can tell because of the dialogue. And it's from what Wayne and Katrina have already just said. But one of the things that you can completely tell when it's AI is when it's trying to write something that's funny, because it just doesn't get humor whatsoever. It doesn't understand context. It doesn't understand. It just doesn't understand human humor. So if you ever see anything where it's AI that's supposed to be humorous, it's going to be something that's just completely out of context or very, very stilted, and just doesn't work on any level of humor.
Man. I can't even imagine it trying to write like a steamy sex scene for some of this stuff like I write. Can you imagine?
Right?
That would just be bad. Like, oh my god.
I played about with ChatGPT and asked them to write a steamy scene. You've got to be careful how you word it because, of course, erotica is not allowed.
Yeah.
And it was just so soft, and it was like, all right. So I would use that and then put my own spin on it. But you know me, I'm totally against AI. I won't use it. I don't like anyone using it, especially when it comes to writing books and fiction.
I mean, part of the fun is writing the story yourself. So why let someone else have the fun part, which is, yeah, it can be painful and can take a long time, but that kind of is part of the fun too.
Yes,
Yeah, it is.
agreed.
It is, yeah.
Wow, man, AI just, man, gosh. And like Vanessa says, I'll use a regular thesaurus to see if there's a better, more descriptive word, but not to just find a fancy word. Somebody found foot patent thesaurus. I'm going to get tongue-tied and I'm going to jump down here. AI doesn't have experience with world conversation, so of course it wouldn't have the kind of pauses or humor or weirdness of human conversation. And yeah, man, you just take that, all of that extra stuff out of the dialogue and it's just not going to flow at all. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, what are some other things that can really mess up dialogue that you guys have maybe come across or read somewhere, like just from your perspective, no specific reader writer perspective?
I think sometimes not letting dialogue just be there for the sake of people talking to each other can sometimes be a bit of a thing, because obviously, you want to, you tell a story, so you want the story to be progressing and everything like that, but you also want the characters to feel realistic. You want the world to feel realistic, so just let the characters talk to each other sometimes. And it doesn't have to be about the plots. It doesn't have to be about moving the story forward. This might be sort of like my cozy fantasy side coming out a little bit, but just let them be themselves and let them have a conversation sometimes and see where it goes. And that's where a lot of humor comes from as well. Is a lot of more heartfelt moments and connection and stuff like that. Is just to let them exist for a little while, and it doesn't always have to be let's progress the story. This dialogue is here because I need to get this bit of information to the reader, or I need to let this character do this, or I need to move the story. It's just let them exist and let them breathe for a little while, let the story breathe, and have a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
I had to listen to people more carefully because was really and stilted. So I just found that the more I listened, and I would write things down if it was a clever saying, that helped a lot.
I think one of the things that I find is when people are trying to use dialogue as a way of exposition, and then it becomes, as you know, Bob.
Yeah.
As you know, Bob, back in the 17th century. Oh, please.
Man. Yeah, that's something that really bugs me is when they use names. It's when we're talking, we don't use that person's name when we're talking to them.
Right.
Of course, you have to let the reader know who you're talking to, the character's talking to, but not all the time. Yet the writing is written like that.
Yes.
But Mary.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's sometimes, Liz, I'm really bad about remembering people's names. Like in legit real life, I just don't use names. I'm just like, hey, blah, 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 blah. Like have a whole conversation and the name is never brought up. Like,
a lot of that is scene management as well, though. Like if there's multiple people in the scenes and you don't want to kind of use a lot of name tags, description tags and stuff, like it is that kind of that is something that kind of happens with dialogue, like dialogue heavy scenes, and there's multiple people in that scene. Is that sometimes it can you notice this a lot when you do quite a lot of beta reading for your own work and for other people's work. Sometimes the geography and the management of the scene goes a little bit crazy. People are just spewing out dialogue, and it's like, who is talking? Like, who is saying these words? Why are they, and who are they saying them to? So it's just using the tools that you have, but like not overusing them at the same time.
Yeah, the overusing of tools, that's gonna definitely throw everybody out of the story for sure. So, man. So, do you guys have any other tips for like everybody in general? I guess it doesn't matter where you're at in your writing journey. Do you have a tip that you use for writing dialogue that you would like to share?
Somebody said it earlier, which is just shit. Eavesdrop shamelessly.
Yes.
Like, seriously, a great writing exercise is if you overhear a great conversation, try to transcribe that and put it on the page.
Oh, yes. That's genius. Genius.
I am so guilty of that. Like, as I feel like everywhere I go, it's one of those things. It's like I can't turn it off. So everywhere I go, I see people or I hear things, and I'm constantly like writing a story like in my mind, even when I'm just out and about, getting coffee. And I do think that definitely eventually comes out in my writing, in different ways that I do write dialogue or different ways that I do try to construct scenes, because I have that visual reference or that audible reference.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that does that.
I go on vacation and I'm like there, and there's like a family, and I'm like, oh, I've written an entire cozy mystery in my mind
Yes.
watching his family.
Oh my gosh.
I do it all the time.
Yes. And I feel like sometimes that just kind of like connects me to people unintentionally, because a couple of our friends that are constantly on here with me now, on Just Going to Now at Multiverse, I really befriended like the bartenders and the wait staff, but like we all spent a lot of time hanging out down there because it was like a break area. But like their interactions and the conversations you have, you're like, that's good, like story fodder, like right there, like how he reacts to this person not doing this or that. Like,
Easily half my short stories started with overheard bits of conversation.
Yes. And it makes a huge difference just to do that. And people watch, right? Oh, David, you're laughing. You have a story to share.
No, I was going to say my tip would be just to watch what you're saying if Wayne's around, to be honest. Listening to everyone's conversation. Well, I was going to say, like, in terms of just a general tip, is that, no matter how hard you try, dialogue is never going to be completely natural as it is in real life, and it shouldn't be, because at the end of the day, you are telling a story, and like everything else in a story, dialogue does have a purpose. And if you just think of any conversation that you've had at a bar or anywhere else, or like how we're talking now is very different to how we were talking before we came on. It's a lot more informal, and you can try and capture that in dialogue and in a book, but you are still trying to tell a story. It needs to be comprehensible. And a lot of the time, actual dialogue between real people is, for someone listening in, can be quite incomprehensible, because there's private jokes, there's side jokes, there's things you were referencing things you were talking about before, there's slang, there's nicknames, there's shorthand talk that people are comfortable with when they know each other. You're never going to quite capture all of that in a book. So bear that in mind as well. Like, it does still need to serve a purpose in the story.
Ooh, that is a good point. Yeah. Anybody else want to share some tips?
Mine would just be, when you're writing dialogue, to just make sure that you break it up with I think we've already said it, with an action. And so it's not just a really, really long conversation, because it will just it will bore the reader. They need to see movement. They need to picture the scene of this conversation taking place.
Ariel, Mickey, thoughts?
Oh, I would just do what Karina said.
Yeah.
I just ditto because that was my problem, was I just kept going on with dialogue, and I'm starting to learn to put in those actions in between, and also to make those actions reflect the character.
Yes. Man, this has been a great conversation about like writing dialogue, guys. For real. But you know what time it is now?
5 to 6.
It is. You're right, David.
But it's question time, and I gotta get the timer pulled up here. So let me hit the share screen button. Select window. Boom. Okay. Yay. Okay, guys. So I've got the questions ready. Do you guys need Need a second to like prepare for this fast question game? Everybody got in their mode. Remember, now we're gonna go from Wayne to Mickey, Ariel, Karina, and David. That's gonna be the order, okay? We're not changing it. We're not gonna go backwards. Just boom, 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 rapid fire, answer questions.
Okay.
All right, guys, here we go. Question 1. What is your favorite holiday tradition? And this is for any holiday.
Nanaimo bar, which is a Canadian dessert, which is like graham crackers and chocolate and coconut and custard, and it's nature's perfect food. It also sums up one of the greatest. It also sums up one of the great Canadian jokes, which is what's in an Nanaimo bar, and the answer is strippers and bikers mostly.
Funny. Mickey.
Potato Luckies at Hanukkah. Those with a little bit of applesauce or sour cream.
Yum. Ariel.
Okay. Probably gonna be baking just cookies in general. My husband is a star baker over here, and last year we started gingerbread cookies when I wrote a gingerbread shifter romance. So
Adding to my list. Karina.
Yeah, decorations, Christmas time.
Watching Blackadder Christmas Carol.
Ooh. If you had to do one fun outdoor activity in cold weather, what would it be?
Tobogganing.
Mickey.
Build a snowman.
Ariel.
sit in a hot tub.
Karina.
You want to build a snowman?
David.
Run somewhere warm.
Ooh, yay! That's mine. Would you rather have snow or ice, and why? Up here with Wayne.
Oh, good Lord. I grew up in Canada. The answer is snow. Ice will kill you.
Yes. Mickey.
Yeah, same thing. I've had ice storms here. I prefer a snowstorm anytime over an ice storm.
Ariel.
Yeah, snow, hands down. I don't like either, but I'll take the snow.
Ice, so I can go ice skating.
Ooh.
Snow, because I'm getting older and less able to deal with ice.
Although putting snow in your drink gets messy.
Ooh. Name
So
one
it
of your
depends on the
favorite
context.
characters from any form of fiction. I'll keep us moving.
I'm sorry, run that by me again.
Name one of your favorite characters from any form of fiction.
Good Lord. Dean, Harry Dresden.
Okay. Mickey.
Tom Joad.
Okay. Ariel.
Buffy, Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, I love it. Dracula.
David.
Johnny Lycan.
Oh, yes.
Oh, God bless
That's what
you.
I was thinking. What is one of your favorite
God
candies?
bless you.
One of your favorite candies. And go, Wayne. Favorite candy.
Favorite candies. Red licorice.
Mickey.
Zero Bar.
Ooh, Ariel.
Skittles.
Herbal tablets.
David.
Crunchy Bar.
Ooh. If you could step into the life of any fictional character, who would it be?
D'Artagnan.
Ooh.
Bilbo.
Oh, yes.
I'm going for Dracula.
I'm going to go for Buffy.
Yeah, David.
Johnny Lycan.
Oh, yeah. What is your favorite form of relaxation?
Reading.
Napping.
Bubble bath.
Listen to ASMR on YouTube.
David.
Map making.
Ooh. Do you prefer to write in longhand or on the computer?
I brainstorm longhand. I actually have to write on the keyboard because I can't read my own handwriting.
Mickey?
Like Wayne, I brainstorm on longhand and then I write it down on a computer.
Nice. Ariel?
Computer, because I've tried to just write anything longhand and my brain just works faster than my hand and it just looks like gibberish.
Always pen to paper, the old-fashioned way.
David?
Computer.
Nice. If you guys could have one special power, what would it be?
Flight.
Okay. Mickey?
Mind reading.
Cool. Ariel?
Healing.
Cool.
Invisibility.
Yeah, healing as well.
Awesome. And what is one thing you want to accomplish in 2024?
I want to sell a screenplay.
Okay. Mickey?
Want to get more books published.
Let's finish out the question. I'm curious. So,
Okay. Gonna say do more events.
yes.
Get In Times of Violence adult edition actually finished.
Oh. And David?
Read more Johnny Lycan books.
Wayne.
May
Good.
2nd.
They
The
are
third one
good.
comes out May 2nd, I swear.
So, I
Wayne,
mean,
you do know what this game was about, don't you? You do know how it was played.
but it was so fun. And I mean, Wayne, I just
know.
see that maybe you just need to continue the story with Johnny Lycan further.
Oh my gosh.
May 2nd is the last episode, I swear. As God
But
is my
is it?
witness.
But is it? Anyway, I'll quit picking at you guys. This has been a fun show. Let's go around and tell all of our viewers where they can find and follow you. We're going to start with Karina.
You can find me, Karina Kantas, everywhere online. And check out Author Assist as well. And of course, my new show start in January, Creative Inc.
Ooh. Mystery.
Hello. That's miles away. Yeah, you can find me. You can come to Ireland and find me there, or you can find me on davidgreenwriter.com. And tomorrow I have the prequel and sequel to The Devil Walks in Blood out, which is called, the prequel is called Darkness in the Pines. Sequel is One Life Left. The next two books in the Nick Halloran Hell in Haven series.
Good luck, David.
Thank you.
You can find me pretty much anywhere. Facebook, Instagram. I'm on Instagram as Wrong Turn Romance. TikTok as less_than3. And arialdon.com.
Sweet.
Facebook, Instagram, and my website, mickeydubrow.com, and on Amazon and bookshop.org.
And if you're in Las Vegas, apparently I'm just hanging out at the sign. So come by. WayneTurmel.com is my website. WTurmel on Twitter /X/ whatever it is this week. And I would love to hear from you.
Yes. Thank you guys so much for joining us on the show today. I'm Madeline Dale, the Chapter Goddess. You can check out all of my books on my website. The bookstore has been updated. Everything else is slowly following. And you have found us here at Go Indie Now. We've always got something getting ready to drop or coming soon. Hit that like button, stay a while, get ready for more shows. This week, we've actually got a spotlight series coming up where Joe interviewed David and Michael and the director Robert James for the unabridged Miss Vera Day book, a documentary about a story of activism, art, and love through the work of David Falk and Michael Johnstone, two San Francisco artists and long-term AIDS survivors. Then we've got the Green Room on Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern with your favorite nemesis, Bob Magoo and Jim Nettles. That's going to be a good one. And then Hit the Dice at 9:15 Pacific P. I guess that's 9:15 p. So as I'm going to say Eastern, as we play Bob Magoo Mount Mayhem RPG. Oh man, that's like a mouthful to say, but that's going to be fun. And
that's even harder than Thesaurus.
Yeah. And then, of course, we'll be back here again next Sunday for another This Week in Indies, where Joe will be hosting and covering another fun topic. But once again, guys, thanks for watching. Hit the like button, subscribe, check out all of our work with the links in the description. And remember, it's always time to go in now.